Senator Gutowski seeks leave of the body to return Senate Bill 274 to the order of second reading. Seeing no objection, leave is granted. Now in the order of second reading, we have Senate Bill 274. Mr. Secretary, are there any floor amendments approved for consideration?
Floor amendment number 1, offered by Senator Gutowski.
Senator Gutowski, floor amendment 1.
Don't want it, just withdraw that one.
Senator Gutowski would like to table floor amendment 1. Are there any other floor amendments approved for consideration?
Floor amendment number 4, offered by Senator Gutowski.
Senator Gutowski on floor amendment 4. Go ahead and present the amendment, if you would, Senator Gutowski.
Sure. This is a bill that, this is an amendment that authorizes a list of funds which would allow up to $26 million in transfers for general revenue fund. I'd like to speak to it after we approve the amendment.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Mr. Secretary, are there any further floor amendments approved for consideration?
No further amendments reported.
Third reading. Now on the order of third reading is Senate Bill 274. Mr. Secretary, read the bill.
Senate Bill 274, an act concerning finance. Third reading of the bill.
Senator Gutowski.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. I appreciate your attention. This amendment is a byproduct of efforts in working with the governor's office and working with my colleagues in the Republican caucus and the Senate Democratic caucus to fashion a proposal that addresses the $26 million in resources that are needed to restore these cuts that have been made to services for autistic children, for people who are living with epilepsy and seizure disorders, for addiction prevention, for support for funeral and burial for poor people, for immigration services, for Teen Reach. The total is $26 million. It's a restoration of public health grants and human services. And the funds that are being accessed here are these other state funds that have surpluses. We had about 100 of these funds in House Bill 318, which were voted on in the bipartisan solution to fiscal year 15. And one of the funds we're including right now, which has a balance of $75 million, is a supplemental energy assistance fund. It's money that's a surplus. It's not needed for fiscal year 15. It can be accessed. The funds that are not included in this bill that were included in House Bill 318 are the road fund, the state construction account fund, and the motor fuel tax fund. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Senator Murphy, for what purpose do you rise?
To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill, Senator Murphy.
I want to thank the sponsor for his tenacity on this issue and appreciate the opportunity to work with him to negotiate this. I very much appreciate the flexibility of the governor, his willingness to work to reinstate these cuts and find a creative way to do so. I think we have found a creative way to do so. Protecting autism and epilepsy and early intervention were priorities over here. We were able to do that for the time being with this bill. I hope that there is a receptiveness to this bill in the other chamber in the General Assembly. I think it's important to note, though, that the fact that this had to happen at all is a byproduct of the fact that the state has been spending more money than we can afford. And difficult decisions are coming down the pike. We are able to forestall that with this bill for this fiscal year for these programs. But we need to brace ourselves for the fact that difficult financial decisions are coming. Let's enjoy for the moment the fact that we're able to help with these programs for the time being, because through the creative efforts of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget and the Senate Democrats and the Senate Republicans working together, we are able to find a way to do this for fiscal year 15. Again, I appreciate the efforts of those involved and encourage an aye vote.
Thank you. Further discussion, Senator Nolan. For what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. And having a child who is on the autism spectrum, I am having great sensitivity, or at least I'd like to suggest that, there are many of us in this chamber that have probably a number of either friends or family, and certainly members of our communities, that are going to be affected by this measure. But I have to ask you, Senator, does the financing, or at least the restoration of these funds in any way require a sweep from one fund to another in order to restore the overall funding for these programs that you're identifying here?
Senator Gutowski.
So if I give your question correctly, that this allows to transfer surplus dollars in these surplus funds to the general revenue fund to fund Project Autism, services for epilepsy, burials for people who are poor, addiction prevention. So yes, it does allow for a transfer, but it's a transfer of surplus dollars that are not needed in this fiscal year. In effect, the fund that I mentioned, the Supplemental Energy Assistance Fund, has an additional $75 million that are not needed for this fiscal year. That's where one of the funds that could be drawn from, but there's a list of about 100 funds that have been provided for that can be reviewed to see if they have excess balances to be used in this situation.
Senator Noland.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your description of the mechanism by which we're making these transfers. But to the bill, Mr. President, this is a transfer by any other name is a sweep. And to the point that Senator Murphy made, that we're spending money that we don't have here in the state of Illinois, and that we should take pleasure, or at least momentary relief, that we don't have to make tough decisions here in the state of Illinois with what has become essentially a train wreck of a budget, not because we're spending too much here in this state, but because in this state, where we have had on average about a $35 billion budget here in this state over the last 5 or 6 years, but have a $700 billion economy, doing the math, it's easy to see that we are spending only but a nickel for every dollar that flows through this state for state operations. So anybody that believes that we're overspending in this state, and who would suggest that any business that is operating on a 5% overhead cost of doing business should truly go back to economics and finance 101 and come to understand that this state is operating fairly efficiently, and we have a long way to go for leveling up to the just demands of these people and the people of our state. So I'm sorry that we're having to engage in what is essentially robbing one piggy bank to feed another. And I agree, we need to make some adjustments to the way that we're doing business with all of these various funds. And if there is a surplus, we need to go in and we need to make sure that they're more appropriately and responsibly, as you have said in the past, Senator, appropriated. But this is not the bill to do that. I urge a no vote.
Further discussion, Senator Trotter. For what purpose do you rise?
To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill, Leader Trotter.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I certainly rise in support of this initiative. I want to thank those individuals who sat down at the table and with calm, thoughtful minds came up with this resolution to a problem which did not have to be. Yes, as pointed out by the previous speaker and things that we know down here, that we do have to organize and come up with a better way of how we spend the limited dollars that we have. But I think we should not lose focus that we're all working for the people of this state, for all of its people. So we don't necessarily have a spending problem, we have a priority problem. We need to remember that we need to prioritize the needs of those individuals who cannot fend for themselves. We need to realize that some of these programs that we call social service are actually life-giving services for individuals that need them, not just for the ailments that have been recognized already, but when we're talking about prevention, those are services we need. When we're talking about after-school programs, those are needed to have a strong, viable, sustainable society. So we need to continue as we go forward looking at how we can spend our limited dollars, that we keep in mind this is not just math, this is also about people. And I ask and I vote for everyone.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Staines, for what purpose do you rise?
To the bill.
To the bill. Senator Staines.
So yeah, I carried the fiscal year 15 budget fix bills and was pleased that we had bipartisan support in doing that. It was not a perfect bill, but it was providing a solution to our current year budget so we could really turn our focus on to fiscal year 16. It was done with quite dismay. I felt like I had a kick in the stomach on April 3rd when I started getting phone calls and emails from providers around the state who got notice, well, really no notice, that their contracts were getting canceled with absolutely zero notice. And certainly not what we were expecting. And, you know, as we've been discovering and having hearings on, these non-essential services are things like funeral and burial. You know, last time we did this, we had bodies piling up in Cook County morgue. Things like Project Autism. And we've heard from so many kids and their parents of those kids with autism on how important these services are and getting them early and making them productive citizens later on. Things like addiction prevention services and the cigarette hotline, the quit smoking hotline. I was very thrilled then that we were able to actually sit down with folks from the governor's office and just delighted that Senator Katowski led this effort very diligently to bring us all to the table and try to come up with a restoration, a way to not have all these grant cancellations, these $26 million, so to speak, get in fact terminated. And now to find a solution to restore them with cooperation of the governor's office and Senator Murphy and others on the Republican side of the aisle is really, I think, a tremendous step forward and will again allow us to now focus back onto fiscal year 16 where we really need to be providing our attention and efforts. I am thrilled that we're able to do this again. It's not perfect having to sweep funds. This is clearly the right thing to be doing so that folks are not claimed non-essential and have the rug pulled out from under them. I urge an aye vote, and thank you again, Senator Katowski, for your efforts on this.
Thank you, Senator Staines. Senator Katowski to close.
So thank you very much, Senator Staines, and thank you as well for your leadership. As stated, I want to thank Senator Murphy for his support here and for the governor's office and Budget Director Tim Newting for his outreach. Last week, sat down with the governor and indicated to him, I personally did what a mistake I thought this was, and I know that our leadership and the Senate President has expressed that to him as well, which I think all of us greatly appreciate. And the fact remains that there's been an understanding, as articulated by the administration, that something needs to be done, that we need to have the resources necessary in order to restore these cuts that have been frozen by DHS and the Department of Public Health, and to make sure that we provide funds for people who, quite frankly, need the most help right now. I want to echo something that Leader Trotter had said. These are just not numbers on a page. They're people with lives, real lives, and they're impacted by this. And there's nonprofits that are lost their jobs, and there are families that can't sleep at night because they don't know where they're going to get the service now. And I think about yesterday, this young man, Dan, who came out there, and he talked about this program, this early intervention that helped him because he was diagnosed with autism and he got the services he needed, and now he's a taxpayer, now he's working, now he's not relying upon any government support. And it's an example when you invest in people, when we invest in people, we change lives. We change lives. And not only do we save taxpayers money, we save lives and we change lives. And this is what's so important. And the priority discussion we need to have here is not just saying that this is a reduction in the amount of money that we have to pay. It's like, what does this mean? Project Autism impacts 15,000 autistic children and adults, 15,000. So what happens if you make those reductions? So And I think about the people that I've met who've been advocating for this, and I'm doing this, and I think we're all doing this for people like Dan yesterday, Danny Stanton, who died because he had a seizure in his sleep. He was 4 years old, and other people like that who have seizure disorders. This is for Brian. This is for Declan. This is for Melissa. This is for Aaron. This is for all the people that we've met, who've testified in our hearings, who said, we're the people who are impacted by this. We want you to rise above any of these political games and do what's right and get the funds in place to make sure that we have a decent quality of life. And that's what we need to do here today. And I simply ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the question is, shall Senate Bill 274 pass? All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Mr. Secretary, take the record. On that question, there are 57 voting aye, 1 voting nay, 0 voting present. Senate Bill 274, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed.